All right, gearheads, we are not live tonight, despite the sign behind me. But Jonathan and I did record this live a few days ago, and this is our last show of the year. Really excited to do this for you guys, and more than anything else, we're excited to how everybody tuned in this year. And it was an amazing year, our best year ever, Speed City. And we want to thank all our new sponsors. Unbelievable list of incredible sponsors this year. And we have some really exciting things for you next year. Spend a little time at COTA this week, and we're working on a really special project for you guys next year. So, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you're celebrating. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next year. And stay tuned for the show. It's the night before Christmas, and all through the garage, not a camshaft is stirring, not even a push rod. Merry Christmas, gearheads, and welcome to your Sunday Night with Speed City, our final show of 2023. This is John Massagale. I'm joined by my favorite Brit, Jonathan Green. Merry Christmas, Mr. Green.
Merry Christmas, Pushrod.
And by the way, very good. Merry Christmas, not Happy Christmas.
What's wrong with Happy Christmas?
No, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm just saying here in America, we say Merry Christmas, and I know you Brits are always saying Happy Christmas.
Yeah, well, we're not very happy people, so whenever we get a chance to say happy.
Yes, exactly. Well, we're going to have a fun show tonight, y'all. We're going to look ahead to 2024 quite a bit.
Yep.
And we'll probably look back a little bit too.
It's a funny time of the year, let's face it. It's a good time of the year because it is a time to reflect. But it also it's sort of like nothing's happening.
Yeah.
I mean, we all went mad last week when the FIA had a scandal, but when haven't they? So, but and that was picked up, as you say, of one sort of tabloid type magazine, and it's gone way too far. Thankfully, Formula One formed around themselves and got it sorted. But there's not much happening, is there?
I know there's really not. But there's plenty to talk about because 2024 is. We'll start with Formula One, especially is what we're going to talk about mostly tonight. And I was thinking about next year, and I thought probably the biggest story right now in Formula One is next year. And by that, I mean 24 races next year.
Yeah.
Because how many drivers have come out and said they are not really happy or excited about 24 races?
And look at how many, when we were in Vegas, situations were that, Ocon arrived ill. Russell said he was coughing all the way home in Abu Dhabi. There was quite a few stories of people feeling definitely under the weather. And if that's the drivers, because we hear more about them, God knows what must have the mechanics and journalists and so on and so forth.
I know how I felt after the end of the season.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it took me a couple of weeks to kind of recover after Vegas and then Abu Dhabi. It was crazy.
The end of my season was COTA, Trans Am, Sonoma the following weekend for historic, and then Vegas. So yeah, I was absolutely exhausted,
knackered.
Well,
did you see Alonso? He was saying basically. He said, he was talking about when he would retire at some point, and he thought, if these seasons are going to go like this, it may push me to retire sooner.
Yeah, and the same is true of Hamilton. And if you're looking for something to talk about, one of the stories I've got tonight is about the Hamilton's future.
Just
talking. It's a really good subject. Is he kidding himself that he's going to have one more shot to get that eighth? Or not. Anyway, that's for down the road. But
Alonso, he said, I love what he said. He said, if I feel slow one day, I think it'll be noticeable, and I won't be happy, and I'll be the first to raise my hand and say it's time to stop. I thought that was an interesting part of this discussion about him saying that 24 races, but I thought that was an interesting take. It's like, I'm going to know if I'm slow and I'm out.
When I did Formula One full time, there was 15 races, right? And there was the occasional back-to-back, right? Maybe. Yeah. And it was Silverstone, Hungary, maybe.
Yeah.
And there was always an August break of 3 weeks. There was always basically 3 weeks stroke 2 weeks between races. And 15 races, fine. Start at the end of March, finish at the end of November, or beginning of November, actually, about the 16th. But now we've got to a point now where it really is, January, from January onwards, you're working round the clock. Don't forget that, to get the car built for February 20th or 24th. And we're going to talk about Ferrari's launch in a minute. But, so you're getting to launch. Then you're going straight out to Bahrain. And in this year's case, Bahrain is what? You said to me the 1st of March or something, isn't it?
Yeah, and it is. And the weekend starts in February. The actual
race weekend,
technically weekend.
So, and so therefore the Bahrain test will be mid-February. So, I mean, you're barely doing a shakedown before you're straight into race to race to race to race. And I really do think, and we'll talk about this next year, I'm sure, throughout the season, but I'm going to put my hand up right now at the end of 23 and say 24 is just too much.
Well, I didn't have an appreciation for it. I know you guys, you've done the whole season, and we talk to Chris Mellon every week during the season. And I know that it's crazy to get up and, go to a different time zone. But Vegas really showed me because, we were doing the races at, we got finished up about, 3 a.m., my
Most
normal
nights.
time.
Yeah.
So I was completely out of whack. Going to bed at weird hours, getting up, didn't know what time it was, didn't know what – and then on top of that, it was still daylight, so it felt like a normal time, but we didn't go on the air till midnight. Yeah. It was weird.
I mean, me and Bob were struggling, dropping words, and you need to be fresh. And I mean, we're just bloody talking, for gosh sake. I mean, when you think about what these guys are doing at the speeds they're doing it at, it's mind-boggling. And I'm surprised there wasn't more mistakes.
Well, and that's why it's a young man's game.
It is a young man's game, and I do think you mentioned the two right guys there, Alonso and Hamilton, in terms of this sort of schedule could push them out. I mean, it's like NFL. Can you imagine if there was 24 NFL games?
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're absolutely right. But the time zone thing, getting on it,
that's the hot
part. Oh, as we know, as the garages are literally packing up during the race, they're hitting the button to travel as soon as the race starts.
And think about it. Not only is the time, whenever you arrive in another country, the water's different, the food's different. You don't have any sense of rhythm, stroke, schedule. It's all like, where are we? Oh, okay, yeah. Now, what are we doing here? Oh, so you're discombobulated, and then when you lie on your put on your pillow at night, your head's full of mush from where you've just arrived from, and the travel itself, as you well know, any plane ride takes a day or two to get over. Especially anything up to 8 hours takes you at least 2 days to get over, and yet in Formula One, you're flying out Wednesday, and you're into the thick of it Thursday.
Yeah, I know, that's crazy. So that is going to be a big. It's going to be interesting to watch. We're going to live it, but we're going to be here in the studio for most of the races next year.
Yeah.
But that is going to be crazy. And Leclerc even said it. There was one more driver that said with a Grand Prix weekend, you lose a little bit of that special feeling that a Grand Prix has. Think about that. There is that. How many of these does it become where it's kind of the same old thing? You're really not excited about them anymore.
Well, and also, Liberty, you've got to look at the knock-on effect of a Thursday press conference where you just can't be bothered. And when some journalist, pokes you in the eye or with a question, so to speak, metaphorically, you're not interested in talking to him or being, at ease with yourself. Even Hamilton, Mr. Most Zen. It's just not a lot of fun, and you're having to go to these. Then the sponsors are pulling you, and it's supposed to be. Look, the whole point of Drive to Survive is that we're looking at this amazing world that these people have, and when they're dull and basically everybody's Lance Hall,
yeah,
it's not fun.
One word answers, yes.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. I like I said, I didn't get it, but I do now for sure.
Yeah, I saw George Russell was quite strong about it too, saying, fatigue and illness at the end of the current 22 race term, and how sustainable is it to do 24,
Yeah, he said he was pretty vocal about that multiple times, by the way. So, but yeah, let's talk about some other stuff, Jonathan. We've got, I put in here the notes about driver lineups and contract links and all that. I mean, I do want to talk about the driver lineups. I mean, I was thinking about if I were to rank the driver lineups, right? You've got, starting at Red Bull, you definitely feel like Checo, whether it was just a bad year or what, that's
Yeah, I mean, look, Checo didn't lose the ability to drive, as nor did Ricciardo. So it's a good pairing. It is a good pairing. And he, let's face it, the history will show that he came second in the championship, and he won in Singapore. And all right, that was rare, but Red Bull. Sorry, he won. Wait, sorry, he didn't win in Singapore. I've forgotten already. See, I'm tired.
Yeah.
But anyway, it wasn't a great season for him, but it's not a bad pairing.
Yeah.
And I mean, the problem is you've got to be so strong to be Verstappen's teammate that, and you only have to look at Albon, Kvyat, and so on, that have gone by the wayside as his teammate to go, okay, well, who are you going to put next to him?
Yeah.
And it's either like Hamilton, where it becomes really controversial, as it did with Alonso and Hamilton at McLaren, or you choose a young guy like a Russell and put him alongside Verstappen or a Lawson. And then really you're not the threat that you might be if you were an equal or as experienced. And I mean, he has the experience of a Hamilton already, does Verstappen. I mean, he's been going that long. We forget that he came into Formula One at 18 and won his first race, by the way.
Yeah. Well, so if you had to pick right now, I mean, to me, obviously anybody has Max Verstappen on their team is going to be in that conversation. But you Mercedes, you cannot discount Lewis Hamilton and George Russell.
That's a great pairing.
Ferrari.
That's a great. I'll tell you why it's a great pairing.
Okay.
That's a great pairing because Lewis is at the end of his career, and Russell is, in my opinion, the next big thing.
Didn't have a great 2023.
Didn't have a great season this year, but the car wasn't very good.
Right.
And I think Hamilton used his head to get over problems, and Russell was quick when he was able. But the record shows that Hamilton probably had a better season overall.
Yeah.
But it's a good pairing. They get on well. Russell respects Hamilton, but knows that he's within himself and has the confidence to know that he's not going to be over intimidated by Hamilton.
And I also think he has the comfort knowing that Hamilton is at the end of his career.
So it doesn't matter
exactly.
that he finishes runner-up to Hamilton. And if he, in his own mind or his engineer's mind, is where he needs to be, whether it's 0.2, 1/10, or occasionally beating him, or qualified 8 and 8, in terms of that, Russell's A-OK.
Okay, so what about McLaren or Ferrari next?
So we're going in order now. So,
okay,
all right.
I decided in mid-sentence we're going in order.
Okay, yeah. To be honest, McLaren's a better pairing in terms of.
I know you're doing exactly what I did in my head. I was like, I went to McLaren, then I'm thinking, it's hard not to. I mean, look, Leclerc is the best qualifier in the sport right now.
And Sainz is like Russell.
Yeah,
he's right up there with Russell in terms of. I could throw Sainz into Red Bull, and I think he would come up swimming because he's strong mentally. His father was a racing driver just as Max's was. I think they are both mentally strong because of their fathers and because of the experience that those fathers give them. I don't think either of them messes with their careers of their sons, but I think they swagger. It's a bit like Nico Rosberg, Mm-hmm. You have a swagger. Damon Hill had it, and Villeneuve obviously had it. But it's that's an extra kind of walk in the door. I belong here kind of thing. Not I have to prove myself like an Ocon or a few other young drivers or a Russell or anybody else. So I think that in that respect you could easily throw Sainz into Red Bull. But in terms of pairing, you have to take a break and I'll think about that.
Yes, you'll have a whole break to decide. All right, you're listening to Sunday Night with Speed City, and we'll be back after these messages.
Hi, this is Max Verstappen, and you're listening to Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, welcome back to Speed City. Jonathan, you were deciding whether or not the pairing of the McLaren boys with Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri was better than the Ferrari pairing.
I think what entices you to say that is that they're both really young and they're both really good. And in other words, when Lando arrived, he was the next hot shoe. And Piastri, remember...
I thought you were going to say another word for a second there. But go ahead.
No, but he was. And when Piastri arrived, it was even better because... Or I kept being very cynical about it, going, gosh, this guy must be good. They fired Ricciardo, paid Ricciardo off over $20 million to go away from a guy who's won 8 Grand Prix.
But it didn't take long for us to see.
And Piastri has already beaten his teammate to the first win, albeit a sprint race win.
Yeah.
The kid never lost his stride. You see him in interviews. He looks as though he's been there for 10 years. And, so in terms of a pairing, it's a really exciting pairing for McLaren. And a couple of times this season, journalists, ourselves included, have said, wow, this could be the best pairing in Formula One. And a lot of the team managers have reiterated that. But Ferrari is Ferrari. You know, Ferrari, because of who they are, always have two great drivers, if not one and a second. Schumacher and Massa, Schumacher and Irvine. You know, there's always been a 1-2, and to a certain extent, Sainz is playing that role to Leclerc. Leclerc has just extended his contract by 5 years. Sainz has got a 1 year.
Yeah, and I think, you know what? That is probably the most important stat in that driver pairing right there, isn't it? Because Sainz does, you know, he doesn't play the second driver like Checo does, right?
No.
Which is obvious, but still,
I don't think, to be fair, I don't think Perez tried to play second driver. I mean, when Schumacher and Massa, you know, were together, there was no question, and it was, you know, no wonder Massa's trying to get his championship that he never won, because because Schumacher had his leg broken at the time, so you know.
Well, let's keep going down the list. I'm not sure.
I'd go with
here.
McLaren then, to answer your question.
Okay,
but I would say that Leclerc is a far better driver at the moment than Lando, who I would look at.
You think so? You would say far better
as a complete driver, yeah. As a guy who's the fastest guy to qualify, give him the right car. I mean, I'd love to see Leclerc and Verstappen in the same equipment.
And also think about the environments they're in.
Oh,
you got to give bonus points for anybody in the Ferrari environment. That, in my opinion. Just because the difficulty, the strategy gaffes, the intense pressure and everything else.
Because you know what would happen? I mean, I know we're looking into our crystal ball, but it's Christmas. We can do that. Can you imagine Leclerc? I'll get my Scale Electrics out for Christmas and get Leclerc in a Red Bull and Verstappen. And I'll tell you what, he's a smooth-talking, good-looking boy, and the team would absolutely love him compared to what is sometimes a bit of a petulant, skillful man that is Verstappen.
That would be a crazy pairing.
And I think he'd get in Verstappen's head. I think he would take...
you think so?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Well, because he'd be quicker on the day at certain places.
True, especially on Saturday.
Well, that's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking with the same equipment, Leclerc has proved himself as the one-lap wonder. So I think it would be fascinating. And I know I've done 2 or 3 fantasy things here, but that's, I think, part of this is to kind of saw this is how I think this pairing works. So yes, right now I'm going to say that McLaren is a better pairing than Leclerc and Sainz.
By the way, I think it was 15-7 Leclerc over Sainz. I think I heard that.
Yeah,
stat.
that makes, and that, I don't think that would bother Sainz because he's driven very well. And frankly, when Ferrari are in a good position at a track that suits their car, he's not been thrashed by Leclerc at all.
Yep. All right.
In fact, they've had some good battles and some arguments over not them, but they've been on the radio saying, "Hey, let me past. I'm quicker."
Wow. I am looking at the rest of the pairings, right?
Right. Throw another one at me.
Well, I'm just going to choose mine, and then you choose yours.
All right.
I'm going to have to say, as a pair, that I might say Magnussen and Hülkenberg.
As the next one after Ferrari.
Because, you've got, looking at Alfa Romeo, Bottas and Zhou Guanyu, Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo, or in AlphaTauri, Alpine with Esteban Ocon and Pierre.
Okay, I'll disagree with you.
Okay. Who are you thinking?
Ocon and Gasly.
That's what I was battling in my head between those two. But I chose the Magnussen team just to be a little different for one.
It's a tough one.
Yeah.
In that both those drivers. And by the way, if you want to talk about Haas, I think that's a perfect pairing for Haas.
Yeah.
Even though they're the worst team, or sadly the last team in this year's championship, those two drivers are exactly what Haas needs to get them to the front. They're mature. They know who they are. They know how to be quick. They are always quick on any one given day. They are both aggressive when they need to be. And they've both got a really good race mind. So they can drive around the problems. They did it very well. And in fact, they covered up a lot of blushes. It could have been a far worse season for Haas because they did go in a wrong direction. They know that. Yeah. We're going to get Dave O'Neill, I hope, at some point to tell us what he thinks, because I'd really like to know what his take on what happened to Haas and what's going to happen to Haas, because they've got to bounce back. There's a new concrete agreement coming.
Yeah.
And, by the way, remind me, I want to talk about that. There's a new Concord agreement coming.
Yes.
And remember, it was touch and go last time. And Gunter was kind of like the man who brought Haas back and said, come on, we can do this. And Gene said, okay, because you can only sign up for the whole period of 5 years. You can't come and dip your toe and then leave. So
there's a lot to unpack in the new Concord. A lot, including how many races are we right now? The Concord says 24 is the max. Are they going to make it even more than that?
I think that would be a big mistake.
I do too. But I mean, there's a ton of decisions that have to be made, including how much would they charge for new teams like Andretti, and there's a bunch.
Well, and that's another thing that Dave O'Neill can talk to, because if you remember, we went down the rabbit hole of talking about 2 separate traveling teams, which already kind of happens with Ferrari and Mercedes. You bring fresh legs in. It's like making a substitute in a soccer game. It's like, oh, okay, we're getting tired out there, so we'll bring out some super subs.
All right, well, let's keep going. Would you choose Haas as behind the Alpine team?
Who have I got left? I've got AlphaTauri, I've got Williams, and who else? Who am I missing?
The Sauber team.
Yeah, AlphaTauri. Yeah. To be honest, and this.
I can see that this is not an easy decision.
No, I actually think sort of the pairing actually of Ricciardo and Tsunoda, I think is really good. There's a story I put in the.
I chose it because Ricciardo hasn't really had enough time to show whether he's going to be better than he was at McLaren.
Well, the story I put in the show doc was that, Tsunoda needs to perform in 24 or he's not out, but they're sort of saying, look, Honda are leaving and he's Honda's boy. He was the dream winner and wherever Honda went, he would go. And that's fine, but I actually think he's stepped out of that. I think he's become the real thing. And thanks to Franz Tost.
And the problem when you get down this far is that you don't have the cars.
No, that's it. Yeah, it's hard to pick.
And that's why I chose Magnussen and Hulkenberg, because I thought, you know what, I feel like it's a safer bet. They're both more proven.
I'll tell you what I'll do then. I'll go with my Gasly and Ocon.
Okay.
And say Alpine, and then I'll say Haas.
Okay.
And now we're down to AlphaTauri, which I think is next for me.
Okay.
And then I'm running out of team. Alfa Romeo. That's a tough one. Because Bottas is, and Joe. That one is. That's the hard one for me, because I just don't know how competitive that Alfa Romeo is.
I know.
And they're going through their own destabilization as a team anyway.
And Zhou Guanyu was kind of invisible in 2023.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, he didn't do anything wrong, and he held his own against Bottas, which is
he
no
didn't
mean
do anything
feat.
wrong. There's
well,
like
it's
Logan
not like
Sargent
Bottas
got a lot of headlines because of the good and the bad.
I'll tell you what. In the break, I'm going to look up what the qualifying between those two was. I'm sure Bottas out qualified him most weekends, but he wasn't that far off. When you looked at the grids for each and every race, it wasn't like Bottas was 8th and Guanyu Zhou's 18th. No, they were close. And I think, honestly, the sad one is Williams, because Sargent just wasn't as anywhere near. I mean, if you, let me do my fantasy again. You put Gasly up against Albon in that Williams team. My word.
Yeah.
Or Ocon.
Yeah.
And I'm not, and again, I've been Sargent's biggest fan, but he is new to the sport. All right, a better example, put Piastri, with Albon.
Yeah. Oh, I like the Gasly one too.
I mean at the end of the season, you remember Medlin was saying it. When we spoke to Albon, we actually said to him, to his face, "What a season, mate! Wow, you have just driven." And people were going, could this be the guy that replaces Hamilton?
But it's so hard to judge, because the car was the car better than the last year? Probably. But Sargent was so inconsistent at the beginning of the year, especially, and we just don't know. So, it's why you look like a hero when your teammate is struggling.
But
right?
you can do. I mean, look at Russell at Williams, right? Mm-hmm. He was what we used to call him Mr. Q3, right? Because he would take a not so good car. You know where I was going. A shoe-in car. See, it's Christmas.
Come on, man.
Okay, sorry. No joke about it. But no, I mean, he would take the Williams and rag the heck out of it and get it through to qualify higher than it should, which is what made Mercedes go, we're going to have that guy in our team because he's doing things that are, unobtainable.
And he did. In his first year at Mercedes, he outscored Hamilton. So he looked great when he moved up.
But that's what Albon's doing currently.
Albon, it's hard to argue with that.
So I've gone AlphaTauri. I'm going to go Williams, then Alfa Romeo.
Okay.
So I'm going to put Alfa Romeo last.
Okay. It's when you get to that point, it's hard. I struggle with that. I think I probably would have swapped positions just because of where Sargent is today or was at the end of 2023. So.
Well, okay, a better way to look at the Williams thing is to say potential. I actually now look at Williams for next year and go, if those two start performing the way that Sargent was performing at the end of the year, remember where he qualified.
I know, and that injection of being given another year, that confidence injection, absolutely.
So, I do think that is something to think about.
All right. Well, we will continue our Formula One discussions looking ahead at 2024 after this. Listen to Sunday Night with Speed City. We'll be back after these messages.
Hello to everyone. This is Gunther Steiner. This is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, Casey, you've pushed the limit with this song.
All I want for Christmas is my 2 front teeth.
And a hippopotamus. Thanks to Gunther for bringing us back. And hopefully he will get his new CBS series that I think we talked about it before. You saw that, right, Jonathan?
Yeah.
Where he's potentially going to have.
I don't think that's going to happen, do you?
I don't, but hey, I will not put anything, past the momentum of Formula One right now. Hey, before we get too far away from the drivers, did you find your stat yet or not?
No.
Okay, well, look.
Well, I found that Bottas got 4 more points than Joe, but I was trying to work out their head-to-head in qualifying.
Yeah, well, we'll keep looking. But I wanted to run down the contract final dates for everybody. So, in fact, we'll start at the bottom because actually we'll do alphabetical. Alfa Romeo with Albert. Bottas is through 2024, and so is Zhou Guanyu. AlphaTauri, both drivers, Tsunoda and Ricciardo, through 2024. Ocon through 2020 with Alpine. Ocon 2024. Pierre Gasly, a multi-year deal.
Sorry, go back over those again. I want to imbibe those better.
So far, everybody, it's 2024, except for Pierre Gasly.
So who else is on a 1 year? Sainz?
I'm still going. I'm still going. So Aston Martin alphabetically, they're both. Alonso's on a multi-year deal, which
Alpine wouldn't give him.
Yeah. And Stroll is on a rolling contract. Lance is on a rolling contract. So I guess that means it just automatically renews if they don't fire you.
Hi, Dad.
Yeah, exactly. And Ferrari, alphabetical, by the way, Leclerc and Sainz both 2024, except Leclerc just signed his new contract through 2029.
And by the way, Sainz has not been given a new one. He's staying where he is. So he's got a 1 year. He's on
1 year, right?
Yeah, 1 year.
Magnussen on a multi-year, Hulkenberg 2024, Lando 2025, Piastri 2026, Russell 2025, Hamilton 2025. So both Mercedes drivers. Verstappen 2028, Perez 2024, Albon multi-year deal, and of course Sargent has got his 1 year deal for 2024. So most of them
make sense. And I mean, even the Mercedes one at 25 makes sense for both of those drivers.
Yes, for both.
Because Russell could jump ship.
Yep.
Leclerc was the most obvious, and they've tied him down. But that doesn't mean you don't get out of a contract. Mm-hmm. There's performance bits in there as well. There's no question if Ferrari hadn't done that deal, Leclerc was at the top of everybody's list to move on, to replace Hamilton, to replace Perez, to whatever. Yeah. So they've sort of said, nope, he's staying.
All right, well, let's look at this story you put in there, Jonathan, where it says the Formula One bosses say it might not be fun for next year. And I read that headline and I went, I bet that has something to do with Max Verstappen.
Well, yeah, and I mean, it is going to be a really tough grind out year it's going to be, we're going to hit the ground running with, testing. And I don't think much is going to change. I mean, I know everybody's got new cars and there might be a little shuffle here, a little shuffle there, but how much of an indicator was this year's preseason testing in Bahrain, where McLaren said we're going home, Mercedes said we may as well. So, and look at where they finished.
Well, yes, I have hope because of what Aston Martin did, and I have hope because of what McLaren did over the season. But by the way, if you ask Christian Horner, did you hear his statements? He said, "Oh, this year was a unicorn. We will not do it." He said, "We will not repeat 2023." And that's a good bet, of course. But yeah,
to be honest, I actually agree with that. I think it was.
It's almost impossible statistically, right?
Statistically, yeah. The other teams will, and we can now put our finger on it, which is they got over how to keep the downforce in slow-moving situations and in high-moving situations, i.e., on the straights and in the corners. A lot of teams, and how to use that mechanical grip and downforce to not wear out the tires. That was Haas's problem. Yep. So there's some really simple equations, stroke answers to what went wrong. Mercedes definitely felt that they had gone the wrong way and spent the rest of the year trying to fight it. Okay. McLaren did a better job in some ways than Mercedes.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
Of righting the problem.
Right. Of making progress. Nobody touched him on that. All right, I had a good one for you. And I know we haven't discussed this. Who do you think will make the most progress next year?
Sargent.
Well, okay. Sargent, I was going to say which team. Driver, I agree with that. That's an easy one. You start at the lowest bar. But team-wise, who do you think can make the most progress? I know this is a really tough question, but think about.
I actually think Mercedes will be a better Mercedes next year. Simply because they didn't lose the ability to, and they are a powerhouse, and nothing's changed, really. So they've got a very strong team. They know where they went wrong. They know what they've got to put right. They've got a whole year of looking at Newey's magic design, and frankly, I think they'll write it. And I think also, the luck of the draw as well. They got lucky on a few occasions as well. Did Red Bull? In that, they were dominant. I'll give you that. But Verstappen was driving out of his mind, and I think. You look at where Alonso was at the beginning of the season and how he, he showed glimpses of being really competitive. And if they move just forward an inch or two in that sort of, battle, you can see Alonso versus Verstappen versus Leclerc versus, Russell versus, it's very, we said it. What was the, if you think about it, what was our mantra of the first 6 months of the season last year? Who's the worst team in Formula One? There isn't one.
Right. We had a hard time identifying anybody.
Because it was so close.
Yep.
And I don't think in my time, and that's 30 years, that I've seen a grid from top to bottom. We never even discussed the 107 rule anymore. Do you remember? 107%.
So the gap from the start to finish this year, if you go back, 15 years? That might be the gap from first to second.
Yeah.
It was a stunning year from a competitive
when I started in Formula One, Minardi and Brabham, teams like that, and then onwards from that, Caterham, were given dispensation for the fact that they were not far off. HRT, do you remember them?
Yeah.
And so, the 107% rule was meant as a safety thing more than anything else, so that they're not being lapped all the time. But we actually used that rule to say, okay, all the teams have agreed and Minardi can run. That was what it was of a weekend, and everybody understood it. We haven't even thought about that. Who's the worst team? Even Haas. It wasn't like Haas were like 19th and 20th.
Yeah.
Every weekend.
So I would agree with you that Mercedes might be the top. But my next choice, I was bantering around in my head between Williams, because with Vowles, he's done such a good team with that, good job with that team, and the way that role can make such an important influence on a team. They've got that trajectory, right?
Yep.
And Alpine, I don't know. It's after that I struggle. I mean, Haas just statistically they're starting at the bottom, and I'm not talking about necessarily moving up in points because I don't know if that's if Mercedes had a huge number of more points than this year, they still couldn't catch Red Bull. But what do you think about Williams being the next team that would have the next biggest leap?
I think I said Sargent straight off the bat, thinking you were talking about drivers. But I think they're on a trajectory now that is definitely going to see them with the investment that they're having and the time they've got. Of course, we're not really factoring in, and we perhaps should, is your amount of wind tunnel time.
That's true.
Haas now
We'll
have
get
a
the
lot
most.
more time.
Great observation.
And so you've got to think on that. And Williams aren't that far behind; they were 7th.
Yep.
So 7th is a good position in a weird way to be in because you're not losing out as you would be at the sharp end to development time, but you are getting some or a lot. And so I think you're right. I think Williams is a good bet for turning around. I think Alpine have got a lot going on behind the scenes. I think they're hampered by the fact that they don't have a customer to that engine, so they're on their own.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering whether the days of the mighty Renault being dominant in Formula One with 3 or 4 teams using the Renault engine are long gone. They're the only team. I always find it interesting because let's face it, Mercedes have a lot of data to be able to look at as to what their engine's doing.
Mm-hmm.
Honda have a lot of data to look at
Ferrari,
what their 4 engines. Ferrari have 6 cars to look at. So, if you think about Toto Wolff on a Monday, he's looking at McLaren, he's looking at Williams. He can see where McLaren are taking him on head-to-head, and he can also see where Williams are and what they may have tried to do something special here, there, and the other. So that's a lot of data is what I'm getting at, whereas Renault have just got Alpine. That's it. That's all they've got. They've got no other customer. They have said that they wanted to have Andretti, but that kind of looks as though that deal has gone south because obviously GM have stepped up. But,
All right. I think after that, it's going to be really hard to choose. I mean, you have any thoughts about the rest of the grid about who's going to be improved?
I think Aston Martin will improve. I think,
Think so?
Well, they only moved into their factory mid-season, so that was a huge upheaval.
True.
And I actually think that's had a
new wind
factor.
tunnel and all that.
New wind tunnel, I think they're definitely on a team on the move, just like McLaren are. So if anybody was going to move forward, it would be Aston Martin again. And I think they need to find their chutzpah a little bit that they lost at the end of last season. They need to hit the ground running in Bahrain, and they need to be top 10 every race weekend. But they should be. The investment's there. Lawrence has done the investment. They've got a big team now. It's a proper Formula One team.
So McLaren, you mentioned McLaren. They made such progress. You think could they continue that trajectory? The one thing that makes me think that they might be able to is, first of all, they have the most sponsors in Formula One right now. They have a huge revenue stream from all those sponsors. So they've got plenty of money that I know you've got cost caps, but you've also got plenty of areas where money can be spent that are not controlled in the cost cap.
Yeah, and they're also, they've got some big boffins there. They're making road cars. They're making race cars. They're making sports cars. It's not just Formula One. It's a big company.
That's true.
And you're right. They're still trying to find their way back to the top. And there were glimpses of it last year, and I think we'll see more. I think Lando could win 3 races next year, and I think Piastri could win 3.
Wow. Now there's a hot take for you. I like that.
There you go.
I like that. All right. Well, anybody else before we go to break? Anybody else you think, just a quick assessment? Yeah, I mentioned Haas that, I think from where they're starting. And if they do get some of that Ferrari momentum, they'll take advantage of that. All right.
And I don't know when they have to sign the Concord agreement, but they better,
Yep.
Gene isn't going to do this forever.
That's true. All right. Well, I have a hot take about Andretti Global F1 when we come back. You're listening to your Sunday Night with Speed City. Back after this.
Hi, this is Mario Andretti, and this is Speed City.
Welcome back to the fastest hour in radio, Speed City.
All right, Casey, I think you hit a new low in the cheesiest. You went from the hippopotamus song to the grandma run over song.
He's doing it purposely. It's good. I like it.
All right, when we went to break, thank you, Mario, for bringing us back. I said I had a hot take on Andretti, and you made me think of something that I've been thinking about, and you talk about Gene Haas, and how much he, he's not going to do this forever without some results, because it's been a while since the Haas team has done well. And, I keep thinking in the back of my head, the Andretti is standing there with all this money ready to come in, and they're going to spend a pile of money, right?
Yep.
No matter what,
Yep.
whether the Concord agreement gets, whether they pay a new fee or not, depending on when they come in, they've got all these expenses. Or Gene Haas could say, I started this team for this much money, and I could get roughly $750 million or something, whatever the number is. It's at least $500 million, and walk away and hand it to Andretti.
It's plausible, and he could also keep a majority of the staff as well.
Yeah.
Just like the Jaguar deal back in the day when Gunter was there and Bobby Rahal and so
Good
on.
point.
Yeah.
Interesting, right?
It's not beyond the pale. And the point is now, the reason for Haas to stay is that they are one of the franchises. They are an NFL team. They are the Cleveland Browns, and they will. That's what we should do in Formula One. We should go, okay, who's the best up-and-coming driver? Well, you get to go to Haas.
Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, kind of like
have a draft.
Yeah, kind of like the college draft. But well, anyway, it keeps
it's a good point
creeping in the back of my brain. So.
Well, two things are going to happen. Either Andretti are going to come in and there's going to be 11, and then the doors are going to come down. That's going to be it. That's not going to be any more teams.
Unless they've had a hard enough time accepting them.
And at that point, we will have Audi, Ferrari, Ford, GM, McLaren, and Mercedes.
Wow.
So, name me another. Besides Toyota, who, by the way, are rumored to be looking at coming back, even though they were handed it last time.
Yeah.
But that's the only huge manufacturer, unless you start including the Koreans and so on, that could come out of left field. I don't see it because we'll see. But motor racing is a funny old game.
Yeah, and yeah, you're right. Toyota did get their butt handed to them when they tried this the last time. Okay, Jonathan. So you had a couple more stories in here.
Well, don't we do your stories?
We did. We're hitting all of these here, so, well, one thing we haven't talked about is Alfa Romeo, the team Sauber going to the stake team now. And
yeah, that's interesting. And also, I read that story and thought to myself, that's interesting. Are we going to see more of that where teams, are forgetting their traditional heritage, as if you were, and literally being, it effectively is the equivalent of naming rights for stadiums, isn't it?
Yeah, actually very similar. And the official name is going to be Stake F1 Team Kick Sauber. There's a mouthful for you.
Yeah.
But, we also don't call the teams like that. We don't call the AMG Petronas Formula One team. We call them Mercedes.
Yeah. What kind of steak is it? Is it mignon? Is it filet? Is it?
I don't know anything about
T-bone Alpha.
Steak.
Where's the beef?
Yeah, exactly. Where is the beef?
But yeah. But anyway, I just thought that was an interesting way to handle that. They're going to be Audi in 2026, but until then, this is what they got. And Kick is this live streaming one, by the way. That's
I wanted to do some research on that.
I do too. I don't know exactly what they are, but they're claiming they're going to have a disruptive approach. So we'll see. I don't know enough about it. I'll have to dig into that. But let's see what else, Jonathan. We touched on the Ferrari, but what's the Ferrari launch date of February 13th?
Yep, that's the first one in, isn't it?
Yep.
That's the first one we've had knowledge of, put it that way. They're all around there. And like I said, I think they'll all kind of come within a week or so of each other because you don't have a lot of time. You're racing against the clock in January to get the damn thing finished. And then you're straight off to Bahrain. So there's not a lot of window because you've got to fly out. You've got to get out to Bahrain. It's the other side of the world. It's not like old days where you would test in Barcelona and come back to the factory that night, or 2 days and back, and do the launch. I remember doing the Jaguar launch in Barcelona itself after the test. So
All right. Well, I have an interesting story. I don't know if you've seen this because this just happened. The F1 esports series, right?
Yep.
During the pandemic, everybody was saying, "Man, this is it. This is going to be the future." There's going to be because there's different esports leagues out there, but this one had direct F1 support. it's kind of a precursor to what I'm about to say here, is that they had their event canceled, actually last week canceled, and now they're saying that maybe the future of the series may be even in doubt of this whole esports series with Formula One.
Why did they cancel it?
It's completely unknown. It was not. It had only to do with F1. Apparently, this is. I just did actually I watched a YouTube video from one of the esports guys, and he was saying there was no sponsor issues, and there was no venue issues, there was no, participant issues. It was apparently F1 that canceled it. I just thought that was interesting because of the momentum of gaming, online gaming like that.
Yeah, maybe it's dissipated because all the drivers during the pandemic, kind of went out and twitched and did their own thing, and not that the F1 drivers are involved in the esporting. Sports
I don't know.
Events.
Yeah,
that one. It's not up my alleyway. That one, but
yeah, I did just do a quick. I was on Twitter when I saw it, and I clicked one of the official esports. It only got 5,000 followers. I was like, wow, that's the official account. So, I mean, I know that's probably not the right platform for that demographic, but I just thought that was an interesting story. And I with the, gaming continues to grow like crazy. So
yeah,
I thought, wow, that's unusual. Hey, let's step outside Formula One a little bit, because ex-F1 driver Jenson Button signed his deal with the Jota Porsche team.
Yeah, I think he's been dabbling with NASCAR and everything else over the last 2 or 3 years. He has obviously done Le Mans. I think his TV work has meant that he is still scratching an itch to want to be competitive. He's not that old, let's face it. For a sports car driver, he's right there.
Yeah,
perfect age.
Yeah, how old is he? Yeah,
mid-30s.
No, he's a little older than that, isn't he?
Probably about 36, 37.
Well, anyway, I just thought that was great because he's going to compete full time.
Yeah, and that's a lot. That's a big commitment. I mean, there's a lot to do in that, and he's got a good team. So doesn't surprise me. I noticed also Ford announced another 5 drivers, factory drivers,
Button is
including
43, by the way.
43.
I thought he was older than Alonso by 1 year.
There you go.
Yep.
That's right. 2000 was his first year. Now I think about it.
Yeah, I thought mid-30s was too young for him, but
he just looks young.
He does look young.
But no, I noticed that Ford also announced that Andy Priaulx, who's another guy who isn't long gone, but it was a while back since he won his world titles, but he's just got a factory drive with Ford for their Mustang GT3 effort.
That is a cool
Joey
project.
Hand,
yeah,
all the regulars. Now he did have, if you remember, the reason why he's still in the mix there is he drove at Le Mans for the GT40 when it came back. Remember?
Yep, I do. A very successful comeback. Harry Tinkle,
Mike Rockenfeller, yeah.
Yep.
Tinkle, obviously another great WEC driver. No, I think Jenson will fit in perfectly in that, and I think it'll do Andrew Craig and his team here a lot of good. Jenson's a great ambassador for the sport, full stop, and I think we'll be seeing a lot of him.
All right, final story of the night, of the year. Is that I was looking this week, Netflix, I don't know why they did this, but they released a giant pool of data on their viewership, and it was a stunning, just the fact that you could download whatever spreadsheet you wanted to whatever category, and some huge numbers for Drive to Survive, and just some really kind of amazing stats to go around that. And probably the biggest one, it was 90 million hours of Drive to Survive was watched in 2023.
Yeah, it's interesting, and they've also got another story of they've announced that season 6 will drop February 24.
That's the typical time, though.
February 23rd, 2024. Great way to get you back into the a week before Bahrain. Get back into the feel of it all and remind yourself what you missed and what you're about to see. So but those stats are interesting, aren't they?
Incredible. I mean, the fact that there were 90 million hours, we think about, we talk about how many fans it brought and the value that brought to, I always say it's been worth billions and billions to Formula One. The sport itself, they paid $7 billion for it. They got offered $20 billion by the Saudis. All the teams are now worth, on average, around $1 billion, if not higher. So the impact,
you know, and it's the rare time that sport is in a bubble with entertainment when it comes to Netflix. So you can add, if you look at the Netflix cake, right, of series made specifically for Netflix or major buck Barbie stroke movies coming out, you know, they're lotted in with that. So to compete in that arena is really hard because, you know, a film like Barbie or Mission Impossible or any of these really mainstream movies, to compete on an hour eyeball level is really hard. The only other sport that I could think could come close to that would be Hard Knocks. Obviously not a Netflix product, but, you know.
Yeah, it's a very similar product. I agree.
I would have said that those two, Drive to Survive and Hard Knocks, or there's another one, I can't remember.
Well, there's the on Netflix.
All or Nothing, I think it was originally, but
yeah, but there's been a couple on Netflix. Yeah. The golf one or tennis one.
Well, yes,
which I haven't watched. Yeah, so I don't know.
Yeah, so. But and all of the sports are following it. So
our year is done, Jonathan. I just looked at the clock.
Oh my gosh, I better go to bed.
2020.
He's coming, Santa Claus.
Santa Claus. Hey, everybody! Thanks for tuning in all year long. And I wish I had more time to do this, but thanks to everybody, and we really appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next year.